Welcome back to Art Practice ASMR. This is my week 3 video for Inktober 2019. In this video, you are going to see my inking process and some drawing from all of my Inktober submissions from this week. I'd like to remind everyone that if you see anything that you particularly like in this video, you can always find a higher quality version of it on my social media, which you can find through the links below. Anyway, with that out of the way, it's time to talk. You might notice that this week I'm not telling a story, and that's because I'm pulling another all-nighter this week, and I kind of just found it really hard to read paragraphs and paragraphs of the ghost story I was going to read. It's crazy how lack of sleep does that to your brain. But I felt like it would be much easier for me and much more bearable for all of you guys if I just rambled about something that I can talk about for a long time. And so this week I've chosen to ramble about horror movies and monster movies and basically anything that you should watch this month up until Halloween. Wow, that sentence almost didn't make it. I'm tired. Basically, here's a bunch of horror movies and monster movies and everything that I really enjoy, and you should watch. Basically, it's like my anime recommendation videos, but I'm not drawing anything that has to do with these movies. The first movie I'm going to recommend is actually one that I watched last week on Saturday. It's a movie called The Tall Man. It's a French-Canadian movie, I think, but it's all in English and filmed in the United States, which was crazy to me because I was watching the opening credits and I was like, I don't recognize any of these film companies, and that's because they're all Canadian. But regardless of anything I just said, The Tall Man was a movie that I went in because it was something that I discovered all the way back in, I was going to say 2009, but the movie came out in 2012. So it was probably 2012, 2013 when I discovered this movie. I was really into Slender Man, which was getting very popular at the time. I think Slender Man originated in 2009 from Something Awful, but it evolved into something much bigger in 2012 and 2013 with all of those Slender games that came out. So I first discovered this movie back then, and I never got the chance to watch it until recently. It was free on Amazon Prime, and I checked it out, and it was a movie that put me through a whole wave of emotions. It started out and I thought I knew where it was going, but then it ended up somewhere that I didn't expect. And I really don't want to say a lot about this movie, so I'm just going to leave it at it blew my mind, and that's saying a lot for a movie that was honestly very simple when you think about it when it's over. So, there you go. Give Tall Man a watch because I heavily recommended it. The next movie I'm going to recommend is another movie that I watched for the first time this month. It is Event Horizon. And I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, I can't believe you just watched that movie recently. And to be fair, I was a kid when it came out. So, of course, it would have taken me a while to see it. It's basically a sci-fi horror movie that was very reminiscent of Alien and Doom, the video game. It's a movie about a band of astronauts who are sent into space to investigate the first spaceship with time-bending spatial movement technologies. Basically, it's a ship that has the ability they're out to investigate a ship that has the ability to open up wormholes to other places, and on its first voyage it disappeared and suddenly reappeared close to Earth. And so these astronauts are investigating it, and they find out that some crazy shit happened up in this spaceship. It wasn't a movie that blew my mind, but it was a pretty crazy movie. It has a lot of weird 90s CG visuals, but it's not particularly distracting. Honestly, one thing I really have to praise the movie for is all of the practical sets and practical elements of the movie. It was way before, 100% of scenes are done with green screen and shit that happens now. And it also has pre-Matrix Lawrence Fishburne, and it was weird seeing him with hair, like black hair. I've never seen him with hair other than like the gray hair that he has now, or just clean bald head. So that was crazy. Anyway, Event Horizon, good movie. I'm really loopy, I think. I would just like to say that this drawing is one of the favorites I've done this week. Mainly just the middle panel of this short comic, but it's just me trying to recreate a famous panel from Watchmen, and I absolutely loved it, but I seem to be the only one out there who loved it, which is okay. It's kind of weird how the beginning of Inktober I was getting a ton of likes, and now everything is just going downhill. Kind of interesting. I'm not gonna get into it here, though. Another movie to recommend. I'm gonna go for some classics. One movie that I watch every year on Halloween is Halloween. The original, John Carpenter Halloween, of course. It's a movie that honestly stands the test of time really well. There's nothing in it that really makes me go, wow, this is definitely 70s. Even though it's still a pretty, like, nostalgic movie for, like my parents who were teenagers in that time. Halloween is just the epitome of excellent slasher movies. I'm not really into all of the slasher movies that get kind of ridiculous. I mean, I like Nightmare on Elm Street too, but I think that's really it. I've never really been into Friday the 13th. I've never seen Hellraiser, but I think I should. I might be into it. But Halloween is like the epitome of just a crazed killer going after, like, teenagers having sex. But it's not all about the sex. It's very, subtly about mental illness and psychological stuff, even though it's not at the forefront of the movie. And the brilliant thing about the Halloween movies is that the sequel, Halloween 2, takes place immediately after the first movie. And my mom said that when she saw the movie, it blew her mind. She had never seen a movie like that. And if you're into watching a series of movies, but you don't want to watch all of the horrible Halloween sequels, apparently the most recent Halloween movie, it's called Halloween, takes place, like, directly after the second Halloween movie, but it's like 30 or 40 years later, and it completely ignores all of the other sequels like H2O and Halloween 3, which I hear isn't bad, but whatever. But yeah, Halloween is good. Fun fact that everybody knows by now: the mask that Michael Myers wears in that movie is a Captain Kirk Star Trek mask that's spray painted white. Fun fact for you. I already mentioned Nightmare on Elm Street, and I would say that that's a classic that you should watch. The first original movie is decent, but it's very much a B horror movie that accidentally stumbled upon something brilliant. The acting in that movie is not the best. It's not the best overall movie. Interestingly enough, it is the movie that pretty much launched Johnny Depp's career, as that's his first movie, which is kind of crazy. Every time I start that movie and it says introducing Johnny Depp, it's like, whoa. But if you have to watch a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, I would say watch the first and second ones. More so the second one, as that's the one that's way more coherent. It has better acting, and it catches you up on the first movie even if you've never seen it. It's also one that has genuinely creepy aesthetics in it. It's one that's kind of unnerving at times. The first movie is all about Freddy Krueger killing people in their dreams, but the second movie is about Freddy Krueger trying to come to the real world by possessing this kid. And it even has elements of body horror, which is really unnerving. or at least would be if the effects were, better. But, not throwing shade. It's still good. Another movie that's pretty much a tradition for my family to watch every year, and it's actually a relatively recent movie, is the movie Insidious. Surprisingly, this movie wasn't reviewed well, but it's pretty much a modern classic. The director, James Wan, who did Aquaman, even though I don't really like the Aquaman movie, I will say that he's a pretty brilliant director, especially when it comes to horror movies, particularly the first of each of the series he's created. His movies do tend to go downhill the more sequels that they have. But Insidious 1 is pretty much a modern classic. It's very reminiscent of the Steven Spielberg movie Poltergeist. I totally messed up Steven Spielberg's name right there, but it's totally reminiscent of Poltergeist. Honestly, I consider this movie to be more of a modern Poltergeist than the actual modern Poltergeist movie. It's all about this boy who can leave his body, and one day when his soul is leaving his body, a bunch of demons try to inhabit it. And so basically any house that this boy in a coma is taken to basically becomes a hotspot for ghost activity. It's a pretty interesting premise for a movie. It has genuinely unnerving moments several times throughout the movie. It doesn't resort to jump scares, even though there are moments where the music swells really loudly, but nothing in that movie feels cheap. There is a moment where they show the main bad guy in the movie, the main demon, and they show his full body, and it is like a weird jarring moment where he's like there for a second and it's like, whoa, that's bad CG, and then he climbs along a wall and disappears. But other than that, there's not really anything bad I could say about the movie. I think the movie was like my first introduction to James Wan's work, and it's pretty great. Speaking of pretty great, one movie that I love, and it's another movie that didn't get reviewed well, or a lot of people just for some reason hate this movie, is the Shyamalan movie Signs. And it's not horror, but it is a thriller movie. And it's pretty effective at getting your blood pumping and scaring you. Signs is all about a family living on a farm, and one day a giant crop circle just appears in their cornfield, and soon after that they keep having occurrences, seeing figures outside their window, until one day this just keeps happening around the entire world, and before they know it, the world's being invaded by aliens. The thing that is great about this movie is that it's not this giant disaster movie. It's all focused on this one family in this one town, And the aliens aren't even the main focus of the movie. At its core, it's actually a movie about finding religion. It's a movie about Mel Gibson's character, who is a former priest who left his parish after his wife was killed. And he feels lost. And the entire movie he's struggling and struggling. And he's kind of dragging his family down with him. And the movie's about him, trying to find himself in all of this chaos. And honestly, good movie. Oh wow, I'm really tired because I had no idea how I was going to finish up that sentence. Also, I'm not particularly sure that this is recording anymore because the screen went black and now the image is frozen. No, whatever, I'm just going to keep going and hopefully it all works out. While we're talking about Shyamalan, I absolutely have to recommend Sixth Sense. Even if you already know the twist of Sixth Sense, it's still absolutely worth it to watch the movie. It's not, I actually will say that it's a horror movie, even though it's not trying to scare you at every turn. Horror doesn't exactly have to be scary, it just kind of has to have the traditional elements of a horror movie, like the imagery and the pacing. It's one of those things where you know that a movie isn't a horror movie when you see it, but you know when a horror movie is a horror movie when you see it. I don't really know what to say about Sixth Sense other than just watch it. You probably already know the twist, so, check it out. Oh, I know what I should recommend. Two movies that were huge parts of my childhood, I guess. No, yeah, childhood. The movie Monster House, which I think is a Robert Zemeckis movie, which means that he's utilizing the really creepy motion capture, performance capture. But in this movie, the performance capture actually really works well. They tried to go for a less realistic tone, unlike Polar Express. And it really works for Monster House. It's all about a house that is a monster. And it's basically eating up the neighborhood. It's a pretty good movie. It's actually hilarious. And another movie that I don't see people talking about enough is Coraline. I didn't read the book, but the movie kind of feels like it's a video game, It's this girl going into this strange world. She needs to collect these things to leave, and it's very gothic and cool. And it's all stop motion animated by Studio Leica, and they're pretty brilliant. Anyway, I think the video is coming to an end soon. So I just want to say thank you for watching. Sorry for being tired, and if you enjoyed this, then subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a good night's rest.